Tell me more, or tell me again about the cult aspect of wokeism, because it fits within the Gnosticism aspect of it, fits within the cult structure of wokeism in our country. And I think learning about Gnosticism doesn't make as much sense unless you understand it within that structure of the cult.
Right. So it is a cult, and I'll talk about the structure in a second, but let me give a little bit more legs under that. I said a few minutes ago that this is a Maoist project, meaning Mao Zedong from the CCP, the originator, the first power holder of the CCP, I should say. The CCP goes back to the 20s, so it's older. But Mao Zedong obviously becomes the brutal dictator, the tyrant of CCP China in the 1950s, and then again in the 1960s and 70s. I don't know, maybe 100 million people die. Not so good. Mao had a formula that I think when you hear this formula for brainwashing or for transforming a population, I think it's going to feel very familiar to the woke, which was unity, criticism, unity. So it's a 3-part formula. So you start by creating a desire for unity. You create a desire to be a part of what's happening. In fact, it's a moral desire. It's what it means to be a good person. This is just what means to be good. You want to be in union with your fellow countrymen, with your fellow comrades, I suppose, for Mao. And you want to have unity with your social group, which is headed by a revolutionary cadre in the Maoist circumstance. You want to have unity within that group. So you create the desire for unity. Now, the woke word for that we use in institutional settings in the United States today is belonging. We just want to create a place where everybody feels like they belong. It's an inclusive space where everybody feels like they belong. This is what we hear over and over again. But then what you enter into is criticism. So what happens in a space where everybody feels like they belong? Well, Mao said criticism. So we begin a process of what he called democratic persuasion, where you criticize people for failing to live up to what it takes to achieve unity within the cult. The cult is defined for him in terms of socialist values, socialist discipline, and you criticize them. This is the way that you hurt the Chinese people. These are the ways that you're being an individualist. These are the ways that you're selfish. This is the way that you paying attention to your family actually takes away from the greater good. Blah, blah, blah. And so you criticize and induce people into a pattern of what he called self-criticism, criticism and self-criticism through the process of struggle. That's the way that Mao worded this and phrased it. And we've all heard of the Maoist struggle sessions, which were denunciations, just like Paulo Freire says is the point of being conscientized is to denounce the existing world and all of its dehumanizing forms and domesticating modes. So you enter into these denunciation sessions, these humiliation sessions to criticize and induce self-criticism so that you'll want to join further. And then when you finally start to understand it, you get to study. We say do the work. Maybe your DEI session starts with you having to confess to your racism. Everybody has to confess to their racism in the place where everybody feels like they belong, or their sexism, or their homophobia, or their transphobia. They have to confess to all the different ways that they've had these. Then what do you have to do? Well, you go through these sessions, you criticize each other, you self-criticize, you confess. The desire to confess is at the center of the Maoist cult project. And then you do the work. That's the phrase. In other words, what they called in China, shuixi, which is study. You start studying the relevant Marxist teachers. You start studying current events through a Marxist lens, blah, blah, blah. So now we have not just this kind of cult belonging desire for unity at the beginning in the formula, but now we have our DEI trainings in the middle. And then on the other side, you have socialist discipline in Mao, where you become woke and you have unity within the cult. The hard part is that those different stages, unity, criticism, unity, actually outline different parts of how culture actually structured in reality. At the very beginning, the desire for unity it's a desire, it's a drive, it's a moral impulse. Maybe it's got social tendrils. Your social circle is acting this way. They want you to be this way. They want to help you. You want to be a part of them. You want unity with them. And so you have moral and psychological and social ties, but you may not know anything about, say, systemic oppression or systemic racism or any of this stuff. You don't know any CRT. And that's what cults would refer to, and this is what we talked about last time, is the outer school. Cults tend to be organized into an outer school of people who have picked up a sense of trying to belong to the cult, and then an inner school of adepts who understand what the cult is about. So you have initiates, then you have adepts, and then you actually have the people that are in charge in various, levels of authority, and those would be what are called the inner circle sometimes. So in Mao, you had people who had desired to become socialists, people who were studying to understand communism, and then you had party members at the three different levels of and then of course party leadership is even a higher level of that. So the outer school becomes people who have adopted the socialist worldview. Now they desire to belong to a socialist system. Here we have people who desire to fit in. They don't want to be a bad person. They just want to be kind. They just want to show respect. They don't want to offend trans people or black people or whatever it is that the mythology says they do by merely existing. That's the equivalent of having adopted socialism. They are then criticized and brought into a process of struggle so that they can become not just initiates, but adepts, that they understand the cult and make deeper intellectual and more thorough ties to it. And that's your inner school structure. That's people who know what's going on, but they don't know why it's going on. And then the inner circle are going to be hand-picked people who are allowed to know various levels of, if you want, the conspiracy or the plan or the cult or purpose. And most people never make it there. I mean, I just shared a video today on Twitter that I saw about this exact structure being outlined by a refugee from Scientology. And he was born in a family of Scientologists, and he never made it to the inner circle, even after years and years of devoted connection. He's maybe made it to the inner school, but he never made it into leadership. Those people are handpicked for other traits, and that's party loyalty usually, and being willing to adopt the command structure. So what we see is kind of tying what we talked about together last time, tying in Mao at this time, talking about cult structure, latching it onto the woke movement. I think what we can see is very, very clearly that what we have with the woke movement and being conscientized or woke up or whatever you want to say is a cult that has a secret knowledge that saves us from ourselves. That's why it's Gnostic. And then, or saves us from the oppression that we visit upon ourselves, really. And so that is also modeled after the, I will also say, Gnostic cult that Mao Zedong laid out, where socialism becomes the secret gnosis, that we can all be, one happy state-driven family under socialism with Chinese characteristics, was Mao's secret knowledge. So I think that kind of ties up in a bow kind of the predicament that we find ourselves in. Gnostic cult that's taking on the same shape as the cult run by Mao Zedong in China. And the reason people say, why would we do Maoism in America? Because it worked.